I'm actually disappointed in myself for not being able to see this in theaters, but so much is kind of going on right now. I haven't really been able to go out to the movies in a while. But thanks to Disney Plus, I was finally able to get around to watching Black Panther Wakanda Forever. And I'll say this right off the bat, I really love this movie. I'm one of the people who actually is okay with them not recasting T'Challa, mostly because of a lot of the choices made within this movie. Now, this movie has three centralized ideas within it. One is the mourning of those who pass, and coming to terms with grief, something that Shuri, who is the main protagonist of this movie, very much struggles with. The second is the fallout of what T'Challa did. Whereas I feel that had Chadwick Boseman lived, we would have still had that same premise, but it would be more centralized on how his good deeds start to be worked by other people, and they just use it as an opportunity to try to take what Wakanda had. And the third part is essentially kind of a retread of the same journey that Chadwick Boseman's T'Challa also went on previously. And that's what it means to lead, what it means to be selfless, what it means to think of others beyond yourself, and also what it means to forgive. This movie opens up with T'Challa dying from an unknown illness, suffering in silence, and it's obvious that that is symbolic of the fact that that's what happened with Chadwick Boseman in real life. No one knew he was ill. No one knew what he was going through. I feel that if he had managed to survive, it might be something he tells years after the fact, but he did not want that to define his life for whatever time of it he had left. And that's very powerful. This man wanted to work right up into his dying breath and spend that time surrounded by the people he loved. And that informs a lot of things in this movie, because it really is hard to tell sometimes where the mourning for the character of T'Challa starts and the mourning for Chadwick Boseman ends. And I think it's very powerful to use that to pay tribute and homage to who Chadwick Boseman was. This movie stands as a memorial to the actor and his legacy. But you start with Shuri desperately trying to synthesize an artificial version of the heart-shaped herb, hoping that maybe it will be what's needed to cure T'Challa, only for him to pass while she's working. And a year ends up passing, so this movie, most of the plot takes place in 2025. And with T'Challa gone, Ramonda has become Queen Regent again. She does her best to rule. And of course, outside nations, in this case, when the movie opens, particularly France, tries to invade one of the outreach centers that T'Challa had set up to help others trying to gain vibranium, only for them to be met with the Dora Milaje. And whereas the UN tries to basically bully them into giving them control over their vibranium, Ramonda makes it very clear that if you try to step to us, we will put you down. And with each attempt, we'll be a lot less nice about it, because they don't kill any of the mercenaries as far as I know, mostly just incapacitate them. Whereas Shuri, a lot of this movie is about her struggles with fate. She is a woman of science, and yes, Letitia Wright's controversial statements online are not lost on me with that, but she plays this role so well, and her feelings towards spirituality are pretty much non-existent, so she buries herself in her laboratory work. And Ramonda tries to get her to, finish her grieving, to just let it out, to have that moment. But Shuri's not having it, even when they go out to, symbolically burn their funeral clothes after a year of T'Challa's passing, only for them to be met by Namor. As it turns out, the US government has constructed a machine that's able to detect vibranium, and it's picked up on vibranium that's far down near the ocean floor. But all of the researchers are murdered viciously by sea people in a very eerie moment with this siren song where people go dropping to a watery grave off the side of this ocean platform research facility. It is a very intense scene, but there's also a lot of scenes in this movie that are just dark. You can barely make out anything going on in these scenes, but the eerie atmosphere and the siren song calling people to their death was intense. Honestly, I want to call them Atlanteans, but that's not what they are. Namor shows up to Shuri and Ramonda when they're doing their passing on of their mourning process ritual. And Tina Cuarta is a great Namor. He comes in with swagger, style, charisma, charm, but he's so threatening. He's almost like a leader of a cartel that everyone in the area loves and would never sell out. They die for this man because he's helped their community so much with everything that he's done. Even though he has so much blood on his hands, it's all for his people. And very much like comic book Namor, honestly, I've never really understood the charm of Namor in terms of the comics because his assholeness just exudes so much that I could just never get past it. But here, like, dude, if Tina Cuarta was just, if Namor always looked like him, it'd be like, okay, I understand. I get it. I finally get it now. And it is such a shame that Chadwick Boseman did not get to act opposite Tina Cuarta, because they would have just, bam. I feel like they really would have played off of each other. But Namor comes in, rolls up to the two of them in a very private moment, getting through all of the defenses by going through the water. And he basically tells them T'Challa messed up, because in outing Wakanda and kind of exposing the greater populace to vibranium, that has outed Namor's people of Tolakan, who also have vibranium, and it is pivotal to them in their way of life. And very much like in the comics, Namor has the wings on his feet, which are silly, but then you see him fight and it is like, oh my god, that's terrifying. It's like, the intensity of which Namor fights is just like, damn, yeah, that's Namor, you nailed it. Even with the silliness of the costume and the Speedo and stuff like that, it's just like, I would not laugh at this man to his face. But he tells them, bring me whoever developed this vibranium detection machine. And it's obvious he's going to kill him. And he also tells the two, do not tell anyone outside of Wakanda that we have spoken to you, or we will attack Wakanda. And naturally this shakes Ramonda and Shuri, because he got through their defenses so easily. Who knows how many more of them could get through our defenses just as easily. But they also don't want to completely give him what he wants. So Okoye and Diana Guerrera does such a great job, but also the character of Ramonda by Angela Bassett. Every major speech this woman gives, I feel like someone should just come in from off screen and hand her an Oscar, because she kills it every time. I am stunned with the speeches this woman gives. But Okoye wants to go and find this scientist, and she wants to take Shuri along just to get her out of the lab, which Ramonda is initially hesitant to, because it's just like, I don't know, it might not be safe. But Okoye says it'll be fine, it'll be cool, Shuri can probably help out a lot. So they get in contact with Everett Ross, and he makes it clear that there are whispers about what happened on the research platform, and people say it was the Wakandans because they're so secretive. They can be fairly violent. They think that, they just want the monopoly on any form of vibranium, even what's not their possession, not in their borders and stuff like that. Like, other places just looking for any reason to raid Wakanda and get enough military might to do it, because vibranium, you can't detect it with metal detectors. It's lightweight, it's deadly, it has so many properties. Of course, any nation would want it. But they tell Ross, hey, it wasn't us, but we can't tell you who did it. We need to find this scientist who created this machine and stuff. And Ross spills the beans that it wasn't technically a scientist. Essentially, they stole the design pretty much from a student at MIT who submitted it for a project, and their teacher just handed it over to the government. And that student is Riri Williams, who is an okay character in this movie, but we're starting to have a bit of a trend in these Marvel movies where we have the MacGuffin kid, because it's the same situation with America Chavez. But whereas I feel like America and Steven were kind of a little bit more gel. They had a lot more time together, and it felt like they were like, yeah, this works. Riri never quite feels like she's completely meshing with Shuri. I feel like that's a missed opportunity. I feel like had you had those two characters bond, Shuri and Riri, during the course of this film a little bit more, it would have been a lot more solid. But she fills them in on everything she did, not knowing that her instrument was handed over to the government, but in comes the CIA coming after her because of what had happened. I'm not really sure why the CIA comes after Riri. Like, is it because they believe the Wakandans are going to try to attack, or what? It never feels quite clear to me why they're coming after Riri, because nothing feels like it should have clued them in to go after her, because she had no idea what her technology was being used for. Or maybe the CIA just wanted to bring her in fully. But we have this awesome high-speed chase, Okoye and a car Riri was reconstructing, Shuri on a motorbike, and Riri in a cobbled together kind of Iron Man-esque exosuit, which is cool enough. A nice little callback to what she had in the comics. It's not a full-on suit, it's just kind of like jet boosters, boots, a few things here and there. And that chase was pretty fun. But at the end of it, they're ambushed by the people from Tolakan, and you have primarily the two right and left hand people of Namor, Atuma and Namora. Atuma, big strong guy. Namora, small but quick and agile. And I also love the fact that the people of Tolakan, they're blue outside of the water, but they have regular skin tone in the water. That's such a cool and interesting effect. And it kind of shows that they are alien when they are outside the water, but it is inside the water they are most at home. But we have this great little fight between Atuma and Okoye, and man, Atuma has never really been that cool to me. He has his moments here and there, but he's kind of a jerk, always opposing Namor, trying to take the throne and stuff like that. But here, as just a big-ass boss of a warrior, and he has a bit of a rivalry with Okoye, that was awesome! And he gives Okoye the business. It was wild to see Okoye taking licks like this. But they're out to kill Riri. And while Okoye gets knocked out temporarily, Shuri does her best to say, hey, take me to your leader, maybe we can negotiate Riri's safety. So the two of them are taken to Tolakan, while Okoye has to report back to Ramonda that she lost Shuri. And Ramonda gives this absolutely devastating speech as she strips Okoye of her title and everything. And it is, because you feel bad. And you wish that even the people in the room when this happened, room where it happened, try to tell Ramonda to back off a little bit, but Ramonda's like, hey, she can visit her husband in jail whenever she wants. For all I know, my daughter is dead just like the rest of my family. I told her not to take my daughter. She said it would be okay. She said she would keep her safe. She failed to do so. Not to mention, I'm still salty about the shit from the previous Black Panther movie where she sided with the throne rather than T'Challa. Like, it was just the most devastating of Black mom speeches that just, man, I felt like I was being scolded listening to that. My entire existence shrank from that speech, and just seeing Okoye's devastated face, Diana Guerrera just killed it with her emotion and reaction. Like, both these women were selling that scene. Jesus. But Ramonda goes to Nakia to get her daughter back. She'll distract Namor by going to meet with him for diplomatic bullshit, while Nakia infiltrates and does what she does best. And Nakia, apparently, ever since the blip, as well as the death of T'Challa, has been in Haiti, being a teacher, and she didn't even attend T'Challa's funeral for a specific reason that comes up later. But while Riri and Shuri are being held hostage, essentially, Shuri and Namor have this great moment together where there's just such chemistry between the two of them, where Namor tells him about his origin, how his people back in the 1500s, when Spanish conquistadors were coming to Central America to invade the Mayans and take their gold, trying to find El Dorado and all that good stuff, and bringing disease like smallpox and stuff like that. His people, in an effort to escape, were told by their god to ingest this plant grown from vibranium that would help them find a new home. That is how they became aquatic people, which is kind of weird and a little bit convoluted, but I kind of rolled with it. But Namor's mother, yes, Namor is that old. Like, he's old in the comics. He's even older in the MCU. She was kind of afraid of what adverse effects would have on the baby. So the shaman, created this special bracelet that was going to guard the baby, and somehow that, interacting with everything else going on, ended up giving Namor his special abilities. Wings on his feet, the ability to live in both land and sea without any form of breathing apparatus. He is a mutant, essentially, which, oh man, I love that. And unlike Miss Marvel, Kamala Khan, he is actually classified as a mutant in regular Marvel continuity. But Namor tries to strike up an alliance between Talokan and Wakanda, as they both have this reliance on vibranium. For the people of Talokan, it gives them light within their kingdom. And the kingdom of Talokan is, again, very dark. But it's also just interesting to see. Like, I appreciated that it looks so different from the Atlantis and Aquaman. And man, I gotta say, between the Aquaman movie and now this, like, man, underwater guys getting some good representation. Like, hell yeah. And as someone who loves to go swimming, I appreciate it all the more. But he really gives Shuri an ultimatum. It's just like, you will either ally with us or we will attack your people. But then he goes to meet with Ramonda, who demands to get Shuri back, which of course Namor says no to, and he says, if I find out one Wakandan enters Tolakan or anything like that trying to get her back, I will kill you and flood your kingdom. So naturally, in comes Nakia to get Shuri and Riri back, even ends up killing a couple of Namor's people, and the moment he finds out about this, he's pissed. And there's also this awesome moment, like one of my favorite scenes is when he comes in and addresses his people. They have their own hand sign, which kind of looks like a Kamehameha being fired off, but they also have their own chant, Likili Tolagan. Or is it Ilikili Tolagan? But Namor comes in with this headdress and elaborate outfit, and he sits on his throne, and it is so cool, man. It is so cool. Like, damn, Namor, why you so cool in this movie? But I'm someone who's always believed that Namor was cool, but man. And it's a gesture based on something from Mayan artography or something like that. And Namor just rains hell on Wakanda in something we knew was going to happen, but man, it was cool. It's also wild to see something I've read in the comics happening on the big screen as well. You'd think by now I'd be used to it with everything I've seen from watching all of the MCU movies and TV shows and stuff like that, but I never get tired of it. And Namor's assault on Wakanda with just a few of his elite officers is awesome. He gives M'Baku the business in an awesome scene. He's taking down Wakandan ships left, right, and center. You got the sirens bringing anyone else who would go to an aircraft to their death. You got the Wakandans evacuating as best they can. He even goes after Ramonda, and an awesome scene flooding the throne room. And you have this great scene where Ramonda is underwater and she could get out herself, but Riri, who she was trying to protect, is basically drowning, and she goes back down deeper for her and ends up dying in the process, which really caught me off guard. I did not think she was going to die in this movie, but I mean, hey, she went out trying to protect Riri, which again is the only problem, because it's just like, I don't hate Riri, it's just, man, we really going out of our damn way to save this one girl, and she again just barely feels like a real entity within this movie. Like, I really do wish we had, I don't know, some more time of Riri, like maybe spending time in Wakanda, getting to know the people, just forging that connection, because it really feels like a missed opportunity there. But Shuri watches them try to resuscitate Ramonda, and she's crying while Namor's just like pointing to Shuri, now you are queen. I hope you make better decisions. You got a week. Ally with Tolokan or die. So naturally, Shuri's incensed, even more determined than before to create that synthetic heart-shaped herb. And while all this is going on, you got Everett Ross, who has been called in because of the whole situation going on with the government thinking the Wakandans are just wilding out and stuff like that. And they even have Valentina Allegra de Fontaine, or Val for short, which we find out is the ex-wife of Ross. Like, what? And she's basically been brought in because the US government wants to get that vibranium. They want to even go as far as to destabilize the Wakandan government. They try to plan on just taking over Wakanda. It is some, for lack of a better analogy, some 9/11 invade Iraq bullshit. And damn. And Everett Ross is trying his best to keep them off that trail, try to tell them, hey, maybe it's someone else. Yada, 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 let's not be too hasty. All the while he's been in contact with the Wakandans, telling them what's been going on. But then we find out Val had bugged Ross's communication with the Wakandans, so he ends up being pulled in for treason. Damn, it's a lot going on. And I've heard some people say that they weren't gelling with that subplot, but it's just like, no, this is obvious setup for what's next for the Wakandans. And it also ties into why this whole back and forth between Tolokan and Wakanda is going on, because there's growing intent from the rest of the world to just take what Wakanda has. Get as many people together, raid Wakanda, and take the spoil. But thanks to a bracelet that Namor had given to Shuri, made from the same plant, their version of the heart-shaped herb, the bracelet used to belong to Namor's mother, she's able to get a greater way of synthesizing the artificial heart-shaped herb and using that against T'Challa's own DNA. But she doesn't take the synthetic heart-shaped herb in the more ritualistic way. She kind of does things her way. But instead of going to the ancestral plane and seeing T'Challa or her father or even Ramonda, because she is so fueled by hatred, anger, and rage, and also probably because it's synthetic heart-shaped herb, she ends up running into none other than Killmonger. And while she tries to say that she's nothing like him, he tells him, and a great performance by Michael B. Jordan, he sells every moment of his time on screen. And he says, you're just like me. You're fueled by righteous indignation, rage, hatred, and anger. You're not going to be like your brother and just let your hatred wash over you. You're going to let it fuel you and do what needs to get done. And when she awakens, she's pissed that she didn't see her mother, but we see that she has the strength. And while the populace has fled to the mountains of the Jabari tribe led by M'Baku, she arrives full on in Black Panther suit, and you have this awesome moment where he holds up her hands and he says the iconic, "The Black Panther lives!" This is a great moment, but he also tries to advise Shuri, hey, you trying to kill Namor? That's not gonna settle things. That's just gonna lead to an eternal blood feud between Tolakan and Wakanda because they see Namor as their god. And right now, I don't think we can risk going to war with them, but she is incensed. She's ready to take off, despite the counter arguments from Nakia and M'Baku. She even gives, well, we have the moment where they're ready to set off and just implement a plan against Tolakan. You have Okoye and a newer character, Aneka, who are given this armor called the Midnight Angel armor, which is straight from the comics. But it wasn't Okoye who got the Midnight Angel armor, it was Ayo, who we've seen many times within the MCU. She's usually the second in command of the Dora Milaje. Usually in the comics, it's Ayo and Aneka who are lovers in the comics, and it's hinted at that they're lovers in the MCU too, but it's that we only show so much kind of situation. So we have a complete all-out battle, Wakandans versus the people of Tolakan. They take it to the sea though, so that there won't be any casualties on their shores, but it's also kind of an ill-fated expedition as they're on the home turf of the people of Tolakan. Even though they have sonic weaponry which will, really cause them pain underwater, they still really get a few over on the Wakandans. Meanwhile, we have this great aerial battle because Riri gets her Ironheart armor, but it's not called that or anything. And she gets in a few licks with Namor, and they implement a plan because they learn that if they dry out Namor enough, he loses a lot of his power. So they capture him in a ship, and Shuri tries to fly him out to the desert. Meanwhile, we have a rematch of Okoye and her Midnight Angel's armor faces off against Atuma, while Riri goes up against Namora. Some great stuff there. Namor starts to destroy the ship before it fully gets to the desert, but they end up fighting on a beach shore. It is a knockdown, drag out battle. I will admit, I like the fight a lot more than T'Challa versus Killmonger in the first movie, because man, Namor is such a powerhouse in this. It is Shuri's speed versus Namor's power, and they are just going at it. It feels like with Namor, if he could just get in one good crushing blow, he'd take out Shuri, whereas Shuri just needs to get in enough good cuts to bleed out Namor. It is insanely brutal fight. Shuri even gets stabbed through the stomach, but then she burns Namor, and that ends up being the thing that kind of takes him out. Well, at least leaves him prone to Shuri going in for the killing blow, but then she thinks about, Tolakan and Wakanda and how, the devastation that was already caused and how an even bigger blood feud would cost even more lives. And, a vision of Ramonda helps her let go of her hatred and just say, hey, if you yield, I will not kill you. No more bloodshed. I'll keep your secret. You do not kill Riri. We will make sure she doesn't talk. It'll be fine. He agrees to it. They go back to the people who are still fighting and they squash the beef. Bada bing, bada boom, it's done. Which seems like a bit of a hasty wrap up to things. But for Riri, for Shuri, it makes a lot of sense because, she could kill him, but there's so many in the populace of Tolakan, they would do everything and anything to hurt the Wakandans in every way possible. And it's funny too because Shuri's anger here was very reminiscent of the comics. Shuri just became so angry in the comic. And there was some petty back and forth between Namor and Shuri in the comics after he had flooded them. Because T'Challa, he was pretty pissed. But Shuri is the one who really ordered some effed up shit to go down. It was some intense stuff. And towards the end of things, Shuri doesn't take the throne. She it's obvious she needs some time. So M'Baku basically becomes the leader of Wakanda, and it's very much earned. Winston Duke is such a great guy, and a character is so charismatic, and he's got full charisma in this movie because he's a little bit gentler, but he's not any less sassy. And he really made a great advisor to Shuri, and I can't wait to see what happens next between the two of those characters. Riri gets to head on home. Okoye goes and gets Everett Ross out of police custody because he committed treason by talking with the Wakandans. Shuri finally burns her funeral attire, fully going through her mourning and all that, only for Nakia to come up with a young boy who we find out is the son that she and T'Challa had. Apparently, after the events of the first movie, they got busy. Then the whole blip thing happened, and she was basically raising her child that entire time. It's why we never saw Nakia through anything else. Very interesting way to go. Actually made a lot of sense in the end. And T'Challa had ultimately decided that he didn't want his son involved with a lot of the whole political things. It would just be erased away from it. Which, given everything we saw over the course of things, was a very wise call. Like, damn. And very much a very... If he chooses to take the throne, he can, but if he chooses not to, he also has that choice. And we have this great moment of Shuri just, first it's like she's lost so much, she's lost everything, she has no family, but then here it is, she still has a family, there's still a piece of T'Challa living on, still a piece of her mother and her father and all that. It's such a beautiful moment. Usually in most continuities, T'Challa either has a son or a daughter by Storm. In some continuities, I forget what the daughter's name is, but I know in one continuity the son's name was T'Chaka II, whereas here he's T'Challa II or Toussaint, which is funny because they had France doing some shady stuff, and France had a history of colonizing Haiti, and Toussaint was the one who had helped to liberate Haiti from France. So I love that kind of stuff. But in another continuity, they had a son named Asari T'Challa, so that might be him, and who knows, maybe we'll have a version of this T'Challa II or Toussaint come back from the future and just team up with the Young Avengers or Champions or whatever they end up being called. And I think that really ended up being a interesting way of getting around the fact that we lost a T'Challa, because it's just like in the future we could have another T'Challa. Hell, maybe certain events in the MCU will take place far enough in the future where mutants are around, we have Storm, this young T'Challa grows up to have a relationship with that Storm, bada bing, bada boom. It would be an interesting way of going about things. And in terms of Namor, where Namor does question why he gave up so easily, saying, we would die for you, he makes it clear, it's just like, yeah, but yes, I bent the knee to the Wakandans, but with everything that's gone on, the rest of the world is going to come down hard on Wakanda at some point. And they are one of the most powerful people on the surface. And now, their only ally is Duuz-Diz-Din. And it really just makes you wonder, was that his plan from the beginning? Put enough pressure on Wakanda to whereas they have no choice but to side with Duuz-Diz-Din. Because that's what he wanted from the beginning. And that would be such a shrewd Namor-like move. So that even when he loses, he still wins. Because ultimately, how many of his people really even did he lose? Soldiers, some unknown entities. Yeah, he probably is still sad about it, but Wakanda's on his side now. But man, again, this was a really great movie. I honestly love it about the same amount as the first one. And I feel that I'm ultimately accepting of T'Challa's passing because we've already lost so many characters. And some are just like, oh, T'Challa has so many more adventures he could have. But yeah, but so could Iron Man. So could the original Captain America. We never really got to see Iron Man fight the Mandarin, or Captain America face off against the Red Skull again, or this, that, or the other. So in terms of the MCU, I'm not really of the mindset that we have to have these moments, because there's been plenty of changes made in the MCU, and I don't mind death being permanent. I can't really get that in the comics, and to a certain degree, I don't want that in the comics. I love these characters and the adventures they have, but the MCU is its own beast. Yes, it's a shame we didn't at least get 2 more movies with Chadwick Boseman. Like, dang. I wish he would have lived another 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 more years. 100 years, Chadwick Boseman. But it is what it is. The movies he gave us were great, and his legacy is secure for all of time with this. And I'm still interested to see what happens going forward. The world of Wakanda is still fascinating. We now have the world of Tolokan, which is also fascinating. And I hope we're able to keep as many of the same characters as possible for the next one. The world of Wakanda still continues to be a great achievement for Marvel, and this shows no sign of slowing down anytime soon. But I want to hear your thoughts in the comments section below. But until then, I've been Duuz-Diz-Din, Wakanda forever, and I hope to see you in the next video. Remember to subscribe. Bye-bye.